Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Hunter. Mind capacity starting from Devil Fruit. Chapter 21. Then we're back to square one. Huang Quan fell into deep thought. What is the ability that I most want Gate to expand at the moment? And now, what price can I pay? Only by determining the direction first can we formulate rules, swear them in our hearts, and then abide by them. Only in this way will your own Nen become stronger. This is restrictions and oaths. So, the most needed ability tendency at present is lethality, quantity, size and distance when opening the door or other ability characteristics can be developed. Thought for a moment. Related thoughts emerged in Huang Quan's mind. Try them out one by one. The results surprised Huang Quan. No matter it was enhancer, conjurer, emitter, or transmuter and trait, after he thought about the corresponding oath and restriction, there was no reaction. Only when it comes to manipulator. The faint throbbing feeling in his heart seemed to tell him that the development could be successful. Really, Huang Quan picked up the gravel and started carving on the ground. As I guessed before, the most suitable and restricted range of restraints and oaths expanded from manipulator can only be within the scope of manipulator. It is indeed reasonable. If each system is expanded to 10%, it will increase the constraint and oath set by the 6 series. Then the ability of this devil pattern is really more cheating than cheating. Having said that, since it is a setting related to manipulator, then my development ideas have to change the direction. Thinking of this, Huang Quan thought of Nen who possesses the manipulator in the hunter world. Kurapika, Shizuku, Kurapika, Kate, Xiao. There are many Nen people related to manipulator. And in terms of ability, it often brings people amazing feelings. Just like the manipulator, you can change the form of your own chi into what you want. To put it simply, it is to materialize chi, and the weapons and things that appear can also carry out various corresponding attacks. For those who love manipulator, in theory, anything can be manifested. For example, material type, space type, ability type, consciousness type, etc. It's just that usually, the embodied objects will disappear as soon as they leave the body of the patient. However, through restraints and oaths you can set the conditions for its disappearance, but in this case, the object will lose its ability to be freely retracted and retracted. Moreover, weapons that appear as cheat tools are usually not just weapons, but also have unique abilities attached to them. In this regard, they are very similar to the attached ability characteristics of conjurer. However, the advantage of manipulator that interests Huang Quan the most is it is good at dividing and covering space. Compared with transmuter and conjurer, manipulator is better at creating various spaces. Space. Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but think of Bruno, the holder of the gate fruit, who appeared in the battle on Judiciary Island in the early days of One Piece. Although that guy's brainstorming on the monster fruit feels like a waste to all anime fans. But one point made everyone feel envious and surprised. That is the green alien space that appears after opening the door to air. It is the same as the time of the real world, but it can walk freely in a parallel space. It can also observe the external situation from a different space at any time, and can take various actions according to the situation. It is simply the ability to move, store, conceal, attack, retreat, detect intelligence, etc., all rolled into one. Although it lacks direct lethality, it is extremely combat ready. This is it. After locking in the development target, Huang Quan began to think about what items he had that were extremely familiar and tangible. Yesterday he tested the air opening the door. Although it is only about the size of a small fingernail, and it is not clear what is behind the air, door does indeed show relevant characteristics in this regard. In this way, the difficulty of development will be further reduced. And all Huang Quan has to do now is all factors that consume a lot of air and are uncontrollable after opening the door are made controllable. This is an attempt at his various assumptions and a test of the added restrictions and oaths. Now, after thinking for a while, Huang Quan's slightly frowned brow gradually relaxed. He thought of something that was so familiar to him that he could recall every detail with his eyes closed. That is, book. To be precise, it should be comic book. After all, before time travel, in addition to being exposed to firearms, daggers and other weapons during his years as a soldier, what he came into contact with most after he retired was various animations and comics. It's so familiar that as long as you close your eyes, those comics that you have read countless times will appear in your mind. As for firearms and weapons, not to mention that he has almost forgotten it, and even if he still remembers it, he won't think about it. After all, in this world of Hunter, Nen is the protagonist. The direction of development is determined, and the items we want to realize are determined. The next step is the price of restriction. The corners of Huang Quan's mouth raised slightly. I want to make the door appear as a book, and at the same time have it attached with the ability to see and move the air in different spaces. Then at the cost of giving up all the damage caused by the ability, can we use this to restrict? This is a small bug that Huang Quan suddenly realized. Regardless of the characteristics of the door, whether it has lethality that he does not understand, he is now pushed to the front to see whether it can succeed. Then, restrictions and oaths begins. Let me see to what extent restrictions must be imposed before relevant abilities will appear. There is a strong sense of expectation in my thinking. Huang Quan slightly lowered his head and stretched out his hands, using Fa as the base point of application, gathering and condensing qi between his hands like a flowing air stream. Follow the strongest thoughts in your heart and transform, embody, and materialize the released qi. This is a type of Fa, and it is also the basis for developing manipulator Nen. At the same time, Huang Quan firmly established rules, restrictions in his heart and made an oath in his heart. Sizzle. As Huang Quan's thoughts became more and more intense, the condensed qi suddenly surged, compressing and gathering like strands of white electric current. Not long after, the white light disappeared instantly. A pure white book with an emerald green spiral pattern appeared on Huang Quan's left hand. The pure white book has a texture like platinum and is about 3 to 4 centimeters thick. The entire cover is wrapped with emerald green spiral patterns, full of mysterious beauty. Perhaps it was influenced by the devil pattern or because of the characteristics related to the gate in Huang Quan's qi. As a result, books that were originally pure white were covered with these emerald green lines. And, in the center of the pure white book, there is a Chinese font wrapped around an emerald green spiral pattern. Devil's Gate. Even subconscious thoughts have been absorbed. Looking at these 4 familiar Chinese fonts, the corners of Huang Quan's mouth raised slightly. Originally, he had already chosen several names in his mind for this manifested ability. Unexpectedly, even these thoughts will affect the embodied object during the manifestation. Forget it, the Devil's Gate is just the Devil's Gate, it also counts as a tribute to the devil fruit that allowed me to travel through. Shaking his head slightly, Huang Quan reached out and opened the pages of Devil's Gate. I saw that except for the emerald green spiral text records on the first and second pages, the other pages were pure white and blank. See this. Huang Quan turned it back to the first page and looked at the displayed record information carefully. Trait system. Door. Ability characteristics. Open the door, close the door. Effect. You can open or close any object. The size and shape of the door depends on the energy consumed. Restrictions and oaths. Not yet formulated. Only this little information is recorded on the pure white page. It makes sense. After all, my own constraints have not yet been formulated. What I just used was added from the manipulator. Huang Quan nodded. He has not yet thought clearly about how to set up the restraints and oaths of the trait system. It is not ruled out that when the capacity of trait system is expanded to 10%, restriction will be carried out together. Perhaps, the capabilities can be greatly expanded by then. Next is the second page. Huang Quan, who had some vague guesses after reading the first page, stretched out his hand to pinch the pure white page that resembled a hardcover and turned it to the second page. Manipulator. Devil's Gate. Ability feature. Air door. Effect. The air door can only be opened when the demon door touches the air. A transparent space parallel to reality extends from the air door. Before an exit is set up, you can move freely in the space. Restrictions. When using the air door, it cannot cause direct damage to the target. Oath. Once the air gate is used to cause direct damage to the target, this ability will continue to be weakened until it disappears. In a way, after reading the written record, Huang Quan slowly stood up with the Devil's Gate in his left hand, stretched out his right hand and tapped the empty air in front of him. The ability recording method coordinated by Devil's Gate is really suitable for me. Simple and straightforward, based on my own imagination, based on the characteristics of gate plus various restrictions and oaths to form a unique, complex and changeable nen. Call out. At this time, the air gate, which was extremely difficult to open during previous attempts, was activated with Huang Quan's Devil Gate ability. The empty air formed a transparent rectangular sliding door with a height of about 1.5 meters, which was almost the same as Huang Quan's height at the moment. Qi is not consumed too much. Feeling the continued weak consumption of manifestation qi, Huang Quan nodded. It was much less than he expected. Subsequently, holding the door handle made of air, Huang Quan gently pulled it up. The air door was opened directly by it, revealing an emerald green space scene. Is it because I subconsciously thought that after the air gate is opened, what will appear inside will be the same green as in One Piece? Or rather, it is affected by the characteristics existing in thoughts. After thinking for a moment, Huang Quan, who had no intention of getting entangled, walked straight into the green space. Then, the air gate completely entered with his figure, and then disappeared into the air in the blink of an eye. In a green space, Huang Quan closed the air door and carefully looked at the space environment. Monotonous emerald green is the only theme in this space. But at the same time, the scene within 50 meters of the outside world also quickly came into Huang Quan's eyes at 360 degrees as the space became transparent. Really high definition and transparent. Huang Quan looked down at the location he had just carved with the rock. Although it looks a bit green and transparent, like ripples, everything is clearly visible as if it is right before your eyes. The parallel intersection between space can indeed give people a novel sense of perspective, and it is also a different space that will almost never be discovered. The distance shouldn't be only 50 meters. After observing the area within 50 meters, Huang Quan thought for a while and continued to move towards the edge of the green space. Not long after, he reached 51 meters. The originally green space became transparent instantly, and the visible distance range of the outside world was also broadened. However, Huang Quan only took a few steps and returned to the range of 50 meters with an expressionless face. The space range can indeed be expanded with movement, but the consumption of qi increases with distance. After analyzing the basic spatial rules, Huang Quan reached out and tapped the void casually, and the arc-shaped air gate appeared. Open the door in the space, the consumption is the same as the outside world. After trying several times in succession, Huang Quan nodded, and after testing to understand the approximate consumption, he opened the air door and looked to the outside world. The weather is still gray, coupled with the overwhelming stench, and mountains of garbage dumped everywhere. The characteristics of air door are better than imagined. Moreover, perhaps because gate itself has spatial characteristics, it is possible to create such coordinating capabilities as Devil's Gate at a slightly lower cost. While thinking, Huang Quan opened the air door and walked straight towards the outside world. Buzz. In the empty air, an air door opened directly. As Huang Quan's figure appeared, the sliding door formed by air quickly merged into the surrounding air and disappeared. After stroking the pure white Devil's Gate again, Huang Quan put it away out of thin air with his left hand. This is also the characteristic of manipulator. You can put away the present objects freely. Then, take out the wolf fang necklace that was previously removed from the Shoggoth's neck. It turns out it's because of you. Staring at the slightly yellowish white wolf fang in front of him, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with memories related to it, and at the same time, the devil patterns in his mind began to twist and deform. Courageous necklace. Quality. Precious. Year. 327. Note. This is the symbol of the brave people of the Yizlang tribe. Every adult Yizlang tribe will go deep into the grassland to challenge the strongest wolf king. The winner will live and the loser will die. Carrying it for a long time will cause the invasion of thoughts, courage and violence. The difference is just a thought. Note. There are very few thoughts attached to it and can be absorbed. Absorb. After reading the information displayed by Devil Pattern, Huang Quan directly chose to absorb it silently. Suddenly, Devil Pattern began to change, increasing by 1% on Enhancer while the other attributes remained unchanged at all. There are indeed very few. Seeing this, Huang Quan rolled his eyes. I didn't expect that this stuff would be consumed so cleanly by that Shoggoth guy. At this moment, Huang Quan also remembered the origin of this thing. In Ma Quan's memory, this was something he accidentally picked up at the garbage mountain in District 4 while collecting supplies half a year ago. As a result, when returning to Meteor Street, the group of people who happened to meet Bai Lang gathered outside the street to rob. In the absence of Maki and others, in order to avoid conflict and harm, Maki handed over some supplies to White Wolf's group, including the worn-out wolf fang necklace. At this time, Huang Quan remembered that it was the person who brought his own supplies. He's just a short Shoggoth. It's just that those Shoggoths didn't have the burly figure they have now. Is this guy trying to kill me again and again just because he wants to keep it secret? Does anyone else know besides him? Thinking of this, Huang Quan suddenly had the urge to go to the White Wolf gang to investigate. It happens to have the ability of air door, which is extremely concealable. If there are other enemies. A cold light flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. He who had just killed someone and left his body was not a kind person. Spring. A sudden anxious shout interrupted Huang Quan's train of thought. Shizuku. Huang Quan was stunned when he heard the anxious shouts, turned his head slightly to look, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he quickly ran towards the right front. I saw 5 rather embarrassed figures on the edge of Districts 7 and 8, 200 meters away, moving towards this side with support. Especially Maki, whose body was covered in blood, and his left hand seemed to be broken. In addition, Nobunaga, Uvajin, Shalnark and others suffered considerable injuries, with blood marks everywhere on their bodies. The only one who is not seriously injured may be the disgraced Shizuku. What happened? Quickly running to the 4 of them, Huang Quan roughly checked their injuries. Seeing that their lives were not in danger, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said calmly, "Did you encounter an attack?" After hearing this, everyone raised their heads and looked at Huang Quan in surprise, who seemed to be unharmed. "Were you also attacked by those guys? He must be from White Wolf." Taking over from Shizuku, who was struggling a little, Huang Quan helped Maki walk slowly towards the rocky area. Number of people. Remainder. Uvajin, who was a little confused, looked at each other with Nobunaga, and couldn't react for a while. Only Maki and Shalnark reacted instantly. Looking at Huang Quan in surprise, Shalnark thought, the number of people who attacked us was about 15. Later, when we met Maki and the others, we encountered 6 or 7 people, and the total number was within 30. As for the remaining enemies, nothing has been discovered yet. We have basically eliminated them all. By the way, how many people have gone to your side? How come you are so far away from Maki and the others? Be lost. Huang Quan looked calm and said in a calm tone, "When I was looking for materials, I went to the 9th district nearby. Originally, I thought I was the only one who encountered the enemy, so I came back first." "You're not hurt, are you?" Quan. Maki, who endured the pain of broken bones, stopped and looked at every part of Huang Quan's body with concern. When he saw that there were no obvious injuries, he slowly breathed a sigh of relief. "Tear, it's you who should pay attention." Huang Quan tore off a few clean strips of cloth from underneath the somewhat damaged clothes, and carefully fixed Maki's left arm. "With your strength, even 30 people shouldn't be your opponents, right? How could it be hurt to this extent?" After hesitating for a moment, Maki didn't know how to speak. "Because the enemies we encountered before were really weird. Although it looks ordinary, it can exert powerful attack power. I always feel that those guys are very similar to you in arm wrestling." Holding down some broken ribs, Uvajin bared his teeth and said, "A sudden burst of strength beyond mine, and it is also very durable. If we hadn't cooperated tacitly, you could go collect the bodies for us now." "That's right." Nobunaga looked at his empty waist and sighed. "Even the sturdy wooden sword I made specially was directly interrupted by those guys." "Brother Quan." At this time, Shizuku, whose face was covered with dust and dirt next to him, looked at Huang Quan's fair skin and said curiously, "Has your skin turned white? Why is it getting prettier?" "Well." Holding Shizuku's mouth, Huang Quan rolled his eyes and said slightly speechless, "What time is it? What are you thinking about, little girl? Let's find a way to give you some treatments first. Go to Krollo and the others first." Shalnark pointed in the direction of Meteor Street. "We were all raided outside the street. Something happened to Krollo and the others. If my prediction is correct, either Krollo and the others will be wiped out, our medical equipment will be prepared and waiting for us. Crollo. Hearing the name, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with light. After coming to Meteor Street for such a long time, if he had expectations for something. There is nothing better than the brilliant Phantom Troop characters in the original work, especially the Phantom Troop leader Crollo, who is truly worth seeing. Sure, Huang Quan looked calm and pretended to be confused. The Crollo you are talking about, is the one called Spider. Yes, Quan hasn't joined our spiders yet. Uvajin shook his head, looked at Maki and said carelessly, isn't this because Maki has always disagreed, otherwise Quan would have been our spider's person. Uvajin. Maki looked over coldly after hearing this. I told you not to mention this matter in front of Quan. He is not young. Uvajin pressed the wound and bared his teeth. Just like today's sneak attack, if it weren't for us. If it weren't for us, he wouldn't have been involved. Maki glanced coldly, turned to look at Quan, his expression suddenly softened, and explained. Quan, I just don't want you to get involved in these dangerous things now. I have absolutely no intention of restraining you. There had been many quarrels between the two over joining a gang. Every time it happens, the two of them will become indifferent for several days. Izumi was overthinking it, but Maki still explained with concern. After all, she is her only family member, and no matter what, she doesn't want anything to happen to Quan. I see. Looking at Maki's troubled expression, Huang Quan's calm expression showed a rare smile. I know what you are thinking, don't worry. As long as you don't agree, I will not join the spiders, well, that includes others. Phew. Seeing this, Maki breathed a sigh of relief and said, Quan. You have really changed. If it were you before, you would be very angry now. I was ignorant before. Huang Quan smiled, picked up the imprisonment shield and courageous necklace from the side, and then helped Maki towards the direction of Meteor Street. Let's go, everyone. You don't want to continue chatting here while holding on to your injuries, do you? You don't have to say that. Uvajin covered his wound and followed behind with a dissatisfied look on his face. Before coming, I told them that they would first go to Meteor Street to treat the wounds, but Maki must insist on coming to you, for fear that you would die in the corner of a garbage dump. That's it. Huang Quan turned his head and looked at Maki, who was about to kick Uvajin, with a gentle smile on his lips. Thank you, Sister Maki. Well, upon hearing these words, Maki was frozen and walked forward like a puppet, and his fair earlobes gradually turned red. I want to join Spider too. Shizuku, who was following not far behind, shouted dissatisfied at Shalnark and Nobunaga next to him. Why can Quan do it but I can't? I can also fight very well. You are too young. Shalnark, who was playing with his worn-out mobile phone, responded casually. Besides, you are already a reserve member of Spider, and you will be able to officially join us in a few years. Oh, that's how it is. Shizuku nodded cutely, and took out the remaining brown sugar from his pocket, seeming to understand, and added more. As for the question just now, she has forgotten it. This guy, Nobunaga, who was originally going to comfort the other party, felt a vein on his forehead and immediately quickened his pace. Only Maki and the others can handle such a naturally forgetful brat. That's all, accompanied by a gray sky and a familiar stench. The people chatting without a word, enduring the pain of varying degrees of severity, rushed towards the spider territory in the East City area of Meteor Street. Meteor Street, Dongcheng area, the headquarters of the spider gang. At this moment, on the outside of the pitch-black building that leans towards the dark wind, white spiders with claws and fangs spread all over the front wall of the building. Surrounding the building wall, a corpse with a white wolf tattoo on its body fell to the ground in deathly silence, not breathing at all. In the center of all the corpses, a black-haired boy who looked to be 14 or 15 years old was looking calmly at the black hardcover book in his hand. As for the corpses around him, they seemed to have no impact on him. Crollo. From the dark tall building, a girl with short blonde hair and a slightly hooked nose walked out. Franklin's injuries are not serious. They have been taken care of now. Do you need anything here? No problem. Crollo closed the book with a calm expression and said softly, I'm not injured. By the way, what's going on with Shalnark and the others? It's not clear yet. Pykenoden spread his hands and said, so far, I haven't contacted you, but I have asked Phaeton to look for him. Even if they are all killed by White Wolf's men, their bodies should be found. Don't be careless yet, Krollo said calmly. The person who appeared on our side is Charo, the second-ranking figure on the White Wolf side, which means that the White Wolf Shoggoth is still hiding somewhere. Another possibility is to go find Shalnark and the others. Analyzed from this perspective, the probability of their death is very high. Let Franklin and the others be prepared. Once they find the bodies of Shalnark and Uvijin, they will immediately launch a general attack on the White Wolf and force the Shoggoths out. Yes. After hearing this, Pike Nuodin nodded solemnly and was about to turn around and go into the house to inform, etc. After thinking about it, Krollo hesitated and said, at the same time, check the treatment equipment prepared earlier. We don't rule out that they may come back alive. Let's prepare first. Clear. However, just as Pike Notan turned around again, Krollo, Uvijin's characteristic loud shouts came from the distance. We're back. Krollo and Pykenoden looked at everyone in surprise. Among the crowd that was gradually approaching, Huang Quan also saw Krollo, who was glancing towards him. The same calm eyes, the same calm look. In an instant, there was a certain degree of collision. The area where the spider is located in the remote southwest corner of the Dongcheng area. The building leans towards the dark Gothic style, with peeling walls and cracks of varying sizes showing its age. The space inside the house is slightly spacious compared to ordinary buildings. It's just that maybe it's because of the geography that the sunlight can't shine in, making the environment tend to be dark and humid. Now, there are several simple hospital beds in the spacious living room. Uvijin, Nobunaga, Shalnark and Maki have all had their wounds treated and are lying on the hospital bed chatting about the events that happened today. Besides, Huang Quan, who was leaning on the outer balcony to observe the situation in the room silently, also discovered the figures of Franklin, Phaeton, Parker Notan and others. Only, did these people gather together so early? There was a trace of doubt in Huang Quan's eyes. When he was in another world, he didn't study the original work too much. The introduction to Meteor Street is often only fleeting, and some only include a few short scenes. Therefore, he was somewhat curious about when Spider was established and why these people gathered. It's just a pity. Perhaps because Ma Quan has not been involved in the Spider relationship, not many memories related to it have appeared. Even the figures of Franklin and others did not appear too much in his memory. It's obviously the result of Maki having too much protection. Crunch. At this time, a figure pushed open the door and walked in. Krollo. Looking at the reappearance of Krollo with short black hair and a delicate and calm face, Huang Quan couldn't help but narrow his pupils slightly. Just because the other party entered the room, he did not approach Uvijin and others, but walked straight towards the balcony where Huang Quan was. Seeing this, Huang Quan raised his head slightly and looked into his calm eyes with his calm eyes. This was the second time the two looked at each other. What is different from the outside world before is, originally, Krollo only regarded Huang Quan as Maki's younger brother, thus leaving only a brief impression. But after collecting the corresponding intelligence and the information told by Shalnark Uvijin and others, curiosity and doubt immediately aroused Krollo's interest. This is why he walked directly to Huang Quan as soon as he entered the door. For a time, the crowd, which was originally a little noisy, became slightly quiet, and their eyes were looking towards the corner as if nothing had happened. Especially Maki, whose concerned eyes were staring intently at this side. Huang Quan, who felt this, nodded slightly to Maki, indicating that there was no need to worry. What's the matter? Looking directly at Krollo, Huang Quan leaned against the balcony guardrail and said calmly, "This should be the second time we meet, right? To be precise, it's the third time." Arriving not far to the left of Huang Quan, Krollo stopped and turned his head to look. "A few years ago, when Spider was not established, I saw you in the distance. As for why I came to you, it's because I have some confusion and want to get answers. You shouldn't come to me in this regard." Huang Quan turned around, looked at the dark sky, and said calmly, "Whether it is knowledge storage or intelligence collection, Shalnark and others inside are far better than me. Really, but my confusion is exactly related to you." Krollo stared at Huang Quan for a while, and suddenly smiled. "If I guess correctly, you should be able to read, right? Did you deduce it from the previous arm wrestling information?" Hearing this, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and looked at Crollo. That's right. Since you can ask this question, then you should also be someone who can read. Before he finished speaking, a trace of doubt came to mind. Since Crollo has mastered reading at this time, why don't Uvijin, Maki and others have any idea about this aspect? Is it a deliberate concealment, or has the other party obtained the information about Nian and awakened not long ago? If it was a deliberate concealment, then what was this guy's purpose? Relying on the practice of Nian to conquer others? Or should we determine our leadership position based on our strength? If it is the second type, I have recently come into contact with Nian. Excluding the extremely dangerous situation of being forced to get through aura nodes, after all, the opponent can name Nian. So, is it most likely that someone or a certain force taught him? Judging from the Shoggoth's familiarity with Nian, this possibility is 70%. As for the remaining 30%, intelligence, information, books. A series of methods related to information and intelligence emerged one by one in Huang Quan's mind. Quote. When Crollo heard this, he nodded without any concealment and said with a smile, "Yes, I have only been in contact with Nen for a short time, so I can barely be considered a Nen." As he spoke, Crollo flipped his right hand and a mysterious black and red book appeared out of thin air. The cover is as red as blood, with palm prints as pale as bones and words unique to the hunter world. The back of the book is pitch black, with some mysterious patterns and textures engraved on it. Gee, this is my Nen. Crollo holds a thick black and red book in his right hand that is just right for holding. He touches the pattern on the surface of the book with his left hand and gestures to Huang Quan. Maybe it's because I often browse all kinds of books, so reading also looks like book. By the way, I don't know what your Nian is like. Of course, this is just my curiosity and desire for knowledge. If it's inconvenient, you don't have to say it. During the explanation, Crollo had been observing Huang Quan's expression. Seeing that Huang Quan was still calm and unchanged at all, a strange color suddenly flashed in his eyes. Why this reaction? According to ordinary people's reactions, surprise or curiosity should be the first emotion to appear. Just like Uvijin and the others in the room who are secretly observing this side, their faces are full of surprise. Unless, does the other party know his Nen very well? Thinking of this, Crollo's penetrating pupils shrank slightly. Now, Huang Quan, who realized that Crollo was observing him but didn't know what the other person was thinking at this time, turned his left hand calmly in the face of Crollo's display and curious inquiry. It's not inconvenient, it's just a coincidence that my Nen is also a book. The words just fell. A pure white book with emerald green mysterious lines appears on the left hand. Seeing this situation, Crollo couldn't help but shook his head slightly to eliminate the doubts in his mind. It turns out that the other party's thoughts also appeared in the form of books. No wonder his expression didn't change at all. However, what the two of them didn't know was, the shockingly similar scene in front of them had already made everyone in the room look surprised. Except for the slight differences in height and appearance, the two people holding black and white books were extremely similar in their special temperaments at this moment. It seems that as long as they exist, they are born to be dazzling and drinking alone as protagonists, fully reflecting their unique personal charm. Balcony. That's such a coincidence. After coming back to his senses, Crollo looked at the extremely strange emerald green fonts on Huang Quan's pure white book and said with confusion and curiosity, "What period of writing is this? Why have I never seen it in books? Compared to other words, they are very beautiful. Can you know what they mean? It's just some symbols created for my own entertainment. It has no special function." Also looking at the other person's books, Huang Quan said calmly, "I know what you want to ask. My name is Devil and my ability is not worth mentioning." "Really?" Crollo changed his voice and said, "Do you need me to help you refer to it? After all, they are both books. Maybe our abilities are similar in some aspects." Quote. In response, Huang Quan just stared at the other party silently. He is very aware of Crollo's abilities and understands what the other party wants to do. The ultimate intention, to be precise, it should be the thief's ultimate intention. This is a powerful ability trait that can steal Nen from others. As long as you see the other party's ability with your own eyes within an hour, and after asking the other party nen-related questions, put your handprint on the pale handprint of the other party's book. Then the target that is stolen will lose its own nen. Therefore, when Crollo asked, he did not prevent the other party from noticing the loopholes in his words. Huang Quan simply kept silent and looked at him calmly to make him retreat on his own. Seeing that Huang Quan had no intention of continuing the conversation, Crollo just smiled regretfully, with no other changes in his expression. It seems you don't like this topic. Crollo released his right hand, dismissed the embodied black and red book, and changed the subject. That's right. If we are acquainted, today is the first time. Let's discuss this topic later when we get familiar with each other. That's right. Besides, Nyen, I have another question. I wonder if I can get your answer. The figure of Shoggoth flashed through Huang Quan's mind for a moment, then he remained calm and nodded calmly. What doubts? If I knew better. It's very simple. Crollo looked at Huang Quan and said calmly, White Wolf Shoggoth. Has he already died in your hands? Really? My first reaction was right. Hearing this, Huang Quan's pupils narrowed and he asked, Why do you say that? Because, Crollo said with a calm look in his eyes, according to the information I received, the White Wolf Shoggoth is currently missing. But when the second-in-command Charo died, the remaining White Wolf members did not search for or wait for the Shoggoths, but disbanded the White Wolf as if they were running for their lives. What kind of signal do you think this is? Just this bit of information. You connected the Shoggoths to me. Huang Quan looked at Crollo with a half-smile. It's a little too sensitive. This is just part of it. Crollo's expression remained unchanged and said, I contacted you to become a nen, and according to the information revealed by the White Wolf members we captured alive. The Shoggoths went outside the street before taking action, and in this case, Shalnark and others were not injured at all. Sometimes the most improbable things are often the true facts. What do you think? It would be a pity if you don't become a detective. Withdrawing the Devil's Gate from his hand, Huang Quan smiled and nodded to acknowledge the so-called fact. There is no excuse for the hidden meaning. I did kill the person. Are you satisfied with the result? Just a little curious. Crollo looked calm and suddenly said, Can you tell me some details of the battle? After all, Shoggoth has always been the enemy of our spiders. This guy, are you trying to deduce my abilities from the combat description? Instantly understanding the other party's thoughts, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows, picked up the gray broken imprisonment shield from the ground aside, and changed the subject. Before that, it should be my turn to ask questions, right? After all, you have obtained so much information. Of course, equal exchange. The moment Huang Quan picked up the shield, Crollo's attention had shifted to it. Obviously, he is far more interested in unknown things than known things. It's not an exchange of equal value. Handing the shield to Crollo, Huang Quan smiled and said, Didn't you say you like reading books? Then do you know the origin of this shield? What's the value? Is this some kind of test? After taking the shield, Crollo observed it carefully, followed the patterns and textures on it, and after a while, he directly gave the answer. This is the protective shield that should have been exclusive to the Verta tribe 600 years ago. Oh, seeing Huang Quan's calm expression, he showed a hint of surprise. For some reason, Crollo suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction, and then continued. It is said that it is also a lifelong fighting weapon for the tribesmen. The broken position is the place where the weapon is placed. It is recorded in the book Travel Notes of Marcos Huerta that whenever the Huerta tribe comes of age, they will enter the interior of the volcano in search of a fruit tree called gray chocolate burning fruit. When this gray chocolate burning fruit matures, its volume is between 1 meter and 1.5 meters. After years of magma absorption, the fruit inside will gradually melt into gray natural chocolate. And the gray core, which has never melted but is getting stronger and stronger, is one of the top materials for making shields. And the older the burning fruit is, the larger and stronger the core will be. Etc. Huang Quan said in surprise. Are you saying that this is the fruit core of chocolate, or is it natural? That's right. After giving a strange look, Crollo said, This natural top-grade gray chocolate, because of its unique taste and rich nutrition, has probably been included in the ranks of priceless luxury goods. In terms of the difficulty level of capture, at least it is C+ level. Quote. Hearing this, Huang Quan smiled slightly. He didn't know why, but when he heard the topic of food, he suddenly remembered the prisoners of food he had seen before. The various natural delicacies that appear in that world can be called a holy place for all foodies. And Hunter's world. Recall the food test the protagonist group encountered when they participated in the Hunter test. Perhaps, there are countless delicacies in this world that he did not expect. Interesting. Thinking of this, Huang Quan's eyes brightened, and he looked at Crollo, who was still staring at the shield and studying it. What's the value? Value? It turns out that this is what you want to ask. Crollo glanced sideways at Maki in the room, a look of surprise flashed in his eyes, and then he looked at the lines on the shield and said, "The Verda clan has disappeared for more than 400 years, and there are not many protective shields left behind. It can be regarded as a precious antique treasure. It's just that after all, nearly half of the shield was broken and the matching weapon parts were missing. In the eyes of collectors, this often means that it has depreciated in value. If I were to give an estimate, the market price is between 4 million and 6 million. If you include the long vintage, it will eventually be sold for around 6.5 million yuan. Of course, the premise is that you can take it to the world-famous Yuxin city. Only there will gather all kinds of collectors. Distant water cannot save nearby fire." Realizing this, Huang Quan, who wanted to improve Maki and his own quality of life, saw Crollo's slightly raised lips and instantly understood what the other person wanted to express. "Tell me." Dispelling the sense of urgency in his heart, Huang Quan said calmly, "If you have any requests, please make them first." From your smile, many meanings have been revealed. It is indeed a pleasure to deal with intelligent people. Crollo looked up at the dark sky, smiled slightly and said, "I can introduce you to a buyer who knows the goods in Meteor Street. Although there is no guarantee that the buyer will definitely buy it, that guy will definitely be interested. It's just that, correspondingly, I also have a small request. I wonder if you can agree to it." "Explain." "It's easy." Crollo smiled. "Join as spiders. No need to discuss." Waving his hand, Huang Quan pointed at Maki, who had been observing this side of the room, and gestured, "I promised Sister Maki that I would not join the spiders without her consent. If you want me to join, you have to convince her first." "It's very simple." Crollo turned around and looked inside the room, then looked at Huang Quan, and suddenly smiled, "Just dismiss the spiders." Hearing this, Huang Quan's pupils narrowed. "What's the meaning? Do you know why we formed spiders?" Without a direct answer, Crollo asked another topic. "Why?" Huang Quan, who didn't know much about this, couldn't help but shook his head. "It's just a matter of hugging each other for warmth." "Yes and no." Crollo calmed down and said, "Do you remember Xiao Fei?" Xiao Fei. Hearing this name, a vague figure of a girl instantly appeared in Huang Quan's mind. "Maybe you have forgotten," Crollo said calmly. "Because of her disappearance, we, who were originally unrelated, formed spiders to help each other survive while looking for traces of her. But several years have passed, and there is no news about her. She is either dead or has been trafficked out of Meteor Street. So, without shared beliefs, what do you think the future will be like for spiders?" Quote. Huang Quan tried hard to recall the vague figure in Maki's memory, but inexplicably couldn't recall the other person's appearance. Not long after, Huang Quan, who was a little confused, shook his head and responded to Crollo's words. "Are you trying to say, torn apart?" "That's right." Looking at the seemingly harmonious but quite obvious small groups in the room, Crollo said calmly, "It seems you have discovered. This is also the reason why I did not notify everyone immediately after obtaining the information about Nian recently. Once one gains power, one's ambitions will expand extremely. And the best result is that it is torn apart as you said. Are you thinking too much?" Huang Quan frowned and said, "Besides, what does this topic we talked about before have to do with it? Even the most unthinking Uvajin wouldn't agree to kill each other, would he?" "I didn't say enemies, inside." Crollo smiled. "In order to survive in the past few years, we have killed a lot of people. Once the spiders disband, those guys will definitely pounce on them like jackals. Forget it, let's not bring up this topic for now. What I want to do is, based on setting eternal goals, we will form a team again. I have even thought of the code name. It's called Phantom." Well, at this moment, Looking at Krollo in front of him, Huang suddenly had a wonderful feeling of witnessing history. Phantom, the name is quite good. After coming back to his senses, Huang said calmly, but what does this have to do with me? You should know. Krollo stared at Huang with a solemn expression. Originally, I was the only one who was a nerve. I was able to suppress them for the time being. I also had time to wait for them to awaken one after another. But now there are suddenly variables like you, which means that maybe before long, Maki will be the first to become a nen. If there is one, there are two, Uvajin, Nobunaga, Shalnark, Shizuku, who are similar to Maki, until the small group of thinks. Since the plan can't keep up with the changes, then we should control the variables from the changes. What do you think, Quan? Quote. After hearing this, Huang looked into Krollo's unwavering eyes, and after a while, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. That's very good, but I'm sorry, I still can't agree with your idea. Why? Krollo frowned upon hearing this and said, can you tell me the reason? Reason? Well, after thinking about it, Huang smiled and said, if I really want a reason, it's that I don't like working under others. In comparison, I prefer the leading position. Oh. Krollo narrowed his eyes slightly. You mean, if I want to invite you to join, I have to give you the position of future leader? It's really straightforward. Instead of looking at each other, Huang said calmly, that's right. That's what I mean. For me, it's either a lone wolf or the alpha wolf of the pack. That's more challenging, isn't it? Why not? Hearing this, Krollo opened his narrowed eyes, a smile appeared on his lips, and immediately pointed at everyone in the room. If you want to be the future leader, you can. As long as you can defeat all the members, including me, when the brigade is established, then there is no harm in giving this position to you. Not just you, but also Uvajin and the others. He is worthy of being the future leader of Phantom Troop. His style and courage are truly unique. Huang nodded. A very fair decision. If you are not superior to everyone in terms of strength, you are indeed not qualified to sit on the top spot. Do you think these unruly guys inside will agree with your point of view? Will do. A strange color flashed in Krollo's eyes. As long as you don't mess around, I can naturally make everyone agree with my idea. Read. Huang laughed and shook his head, changing the topic and not continuing. Can you tell me the information I want now? Nature. Although the other party did not agree directly, Krollo understood that the lack of rejection meant that the transaction had formed a verbal agreement. As for whether the other party will reveal the news or regret it later, Krollo didn't care. What happened at this moment was just his sudden interest. Even if the formation of the brigade failed because of this, it was nothing to him. Just like this moment, the process of verbal testing with the other party made him feel a rare sense of pleasure. Actually, you can also think of it. Looking at Huang, Krollo revealed a faint smile. You are in Meteor Street, but you have money and a lot of wealth from the outside world. You mean 4 beasts. You guessed it right. Krollo said. But the only one who is interested in this collection is the mountain beast Elder Fripp in the southern district. It's him. Relevant news came to mind, and Huang frowned and said, the business beast Flip in charge of the recycling and circulation of materials in Meteor Street. This, big shot, one of the talkative elders of Meteor Street, shouldn't be someone we can easily meet, right? Since I came up with this answer, I naturally have a corresponding solution, but... Krollo's smile gradually disappeared. He looked from the balcony to the hidden corners of the surrounding buildings and said calmly, before that, we have to deal with the matters in front of us first. Oh, Huang expression was slightly condensed. Is there any follow-up to the Shoggoth incident? It was the only thing he could think of right now. After all, the first time I walked out of the house, I encountered so many troublesome things. This made Huang, who was always calm, couldn't help but want to complain. Almost the same. Krollo glanced at Huang in surprise, then turned and walked toward the house. Come in first. These things must be known to all members. Does the Shoggoth have any hidden background? Suppressing the thoughts that came to his mind, Huang shook his head slightly and followed Krollo into the room. Anyway, what happens next? The most important thing is to keep Maki's life safe, which can be regarded as repaying the life-saving grace of taking care of him for 3 months. Inside the room, Everyone who saw the two people entering the room one after another fell silent. Although it was impossible to hear the conversation between the two before, the magic-like behavior was deeply reflected in everyone's eyes. What was that just now? Uvijin, who didn't understand cryptic things, said directly to the two of them, "Are you two hiding some secret that we don't know about?" "I'll tell you later." Krollo glanced at it and turned to face the crowd. According to the latest information obtained, the Black Jackal forces in Baikung District are infiltrating into the East District. "Huh, are you talking about the group of jackals in Baikung?" Uvijin was surprised. "Don't these guys never like to step outside the scope of the North District? Besides, we have never had any conflicts with them. Why do we suddenly bring it up? Is it because of the White Wolf?" Not far away, Shalnark, who was sitting beside the hospital bed, calmly analyzed, "There have been rumors that the Black Jackal was swallowed by someone half a year ago and expanded rapidly. This time the White Wolf disappeared and it took out such a large territory. Could it be that the Black Jackal wants to use this as a way to enter the power circle in the East District? It's really because of White Wolf." Krollo nodded and shook his head slightly. "But the reason for the invasion is completely different from what you imagined. Can you please stop playing riddles?" Uvijin, whose head was a little swollen after hearing this, said slightly impatiently, "If you have anything to do, just tell me directly. Do you want to fight with the Black Jackals? If that's the case, I'm the best at it." In this regard, Krollo's expression did not change at all. After so many years of getting along, he was already used to the other person's personality. Then let's make a long story short. His eyes glanced at Huang Quan, who had moved to Maki's bedside for some unknown reason, and Krollo said calmly, "The head of the Black Jackal is the brother of the White Wolf Shoggoth, Shogru. With the disappearance of the Shoggoths and the disbandment of the White Wolves, the Shoggoths will definitely look for clues. When the time comes, a battle with our spiders will be inevitable." What a joke. Veins popped up on Nobunaga's forehead, and a look of anger appeared on his face. "These guys, we are the ones who can sneak attack, right? In my opinion, it would be better to just strike first." A sinister smile appeared on Uvijin's lips. "With the fighting skills of these guys, it doesn't matter how many people there are. Or are you afraid, Krollo? If so, let me take everyone to deal with them." Uvijin, Franklin, who had been silent next to him, said calmly, "Listen to what Krollo has to say first." "Are you ordering me?" Uvijin straightened up and looked at him, with a slight smile and said, "Whenever you can defeat me, come and order me." "Oh, is it so?" When the tall Franklin heard this, his calm expression suddenly turned cold. "Do you think you can beat me?" Uvijin, "It's hard to say." Uvijin's arm muscles swelled slightly and he asked, "How about giving it a try?" For a time, there was a tense situation between the two. "Have you had enough trouble?" At this time, Krollo looked at the two of them calmly. "If you can, let's continue the topic. Unless you want to be dealt with by others without knowing how to obtain intelligence." The stalemate was broken. The two Uvijins, who were about to start a fight, looked at each other again and simply answered their original positions. Regarding all this, the expressions of the rest of the people present did not change at all, and all they did was watch quietly, with no intention of interfering at all. Unruly. Never give in. He is truly a native of Meteor Street. Next to him, Huang Quan, who had observed this, shook his head slightly. If Krollo really wants to form the Phantom Troop, from a normal person's perspective, this time should be the most appropriate. After all, Meteor Street advocates the strong and the survival of the fittest. But, with this guy's thinking, do you want to solve all problems at the moment when everyone awakens to reading? No. If this is the case, the variables are too great. Or, is this guy Krollo enjoying this process? Thinking of this, a hint of surprise flashed in Huang Quan's eyes, which then turned into recognition. If it were you, what would you do most when faced with such a situation? Nurture them, until it is conquered or destroyed. Then it seems. Huang Quan looked up at Krollo, who looked calm. Does this guy want to use this incident as an opportunity to set a test for everyone and lay the foundation for subsequent establishment? In the middle of the living room, seeing that the atmosphere became quiet again, Krollo said calmly, "The Black Jackal is not scary, but large-scale weapon fights can be held one after another in Meteor Street. Do you think that 4 beasts in the Council of Elders don't know? Crollo, are you saying that the 4 beasts have acquiesced in this happening? Shalnark said in shock. What a bunch of old guys. It's time for profit distribution again. That's right, Crollo nodded and said, just like Shalnark said, Meteor Street's annual profit distribution war based on the current intelligence analysis I have been able to determine. And the White Wolf and Black Jackal's successive attacks are just the trigger for the distribution of interests. Next, as long as the Meteor Street forces are beginning to take shape, they will be swept in. As soon as these words came out, everyone present looked shocked. Benefit distribution war. Huang Quan, who had no corresponding record in his memory, turned to look at Maki and asked doubtfully, Sister Maki, the profit distribution war that Crollo heard about. It is a symbol of the reshuffle of Meteor Street. After coming back to his senses, Maki's cold expression became solemn. The last time it happened was 6 or 7 years ago. Maybe you don't remember. That day, the entire Meteor Street was filled with blood, and countless corpses were scattered on the street. Even they died that day. Them. Before Huang Quan could get confused, 2 slightly thin figures of a man and a woman flashed in Ma Quan's memory. Turns out they are Maki and Ma Quan's adoptive parents. Huang Quan suddenly understood. As 2 people who were adopted by that family at the same time, this memory will indeed be etched in my heart. Not far away. Aha! At this point, Crollo manifested a black and red thief's ultimate intent, displayed it in front of everyone, and said calmly. No one knows exactly when the profit distribution war will break out. The situation has always been ever-changing. And the only thing we can do is to strengthen ourselves. You must be very curious as to how the book in my hand appeared out of thin air, right? At this mention, everyone's eyes were fixed on Crollo. Seeing everyone staring at him, Crollo raised the corners of his mouth slightly. The power I control is called Nian. It can enhance the strength of the person who awakens Nian by 10 times, dozens of times, hundreds of times. Of course, the opposite is the price of struggling between life and death. The living awaken thoughts and the dead embrace the garbage outside the street and sleep. If you want to obtain such a powerful power. As soon as these words came out, Uvijin, who was very excited after hearing this, immediately shouted, For us, what is there to photograph about death? As people of Meteor Street, what we desire most is of course our own strength. Just tell me Crollo, what do you need from us to teach us this reading? At this moment, not only Uvijin, but everyone in the room had their eyes on Crollo. Crollo, on the other hand, couldn't help but glance at Huang Quan. If it weren't for this guy's existence, this plan would have been postponed for a few years. Since variables cannot be changed, put them on the table. No matter what the final result is, it will be a very interesting process. The other side. Feeling Crollo's gaze, Huang Quan's pupils narrowed slightly. After thinking for a moment, he was able to gain some insight into the other party's intentions. Create pressure out of thin air. And then unleash the power of the bait. Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at Crollo. No matter what the other party heard about benefit distribution war, it was true or false. It was obvious that the other party just wanted to create a sense of urgency for everyone. Later, he proposed the concept of obtaining thoughts as power, urging everyone to become accustomed to obeying his words in the process of learning thoughts, thus laying the foundation for future group formation. It seems, even if he can defeat everyone in the future, this guy will not give up his position as the leader of the Phantom Troop easily. But wouldn't it be more interesting this way? Looking at Crollo explaining to everyone what reading is, a smile gradually appeared on Huang Quan's calm face. Things are getting more and more interesting. Maki, who was next to him, noticed the rare smile on Huang Quan's face. He couldn't help being stunned, and then asked in a low voice, Quan. What's wrong with you? Fine. Huang Quan shook his head, looked at Crollo and said, Keep listening. What he is talking about now is very important to everyone. If you don't understand anything, you can always ask me. I understand. Suppressing his doubts, Maki continued to listen to Crollo's explanation. Quite a while. This is Nian. Crollo looked around and said calmly, If you want to obtain mind, the most critical and dangerous thing is to awaken. This is the price, which means that you may die at any time. If someone wants to choose a safe way and wait for several years, or decades, then they can go out now. Spiders don't need weaklings. Suck, can I do that too? Shizuku, who was squatting under the bed and eating brown sugar, looked a little cute. He raised his hand and said, if possible, I want to be the first one. You're a reserve member, you're so impatient. Let's talk about it in a few years. Uvajin covered the bandage and grinned. This kind of thing should be done by a big guy like me. Even if he dies, he will die later than others. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed out loud when they saw this. However, amidst the laughter, no one walked towards the door. Obviously, for them who grew up on Meteor Street, death is not scary. The terrible thing is hunger, disease, and eternal loneliness. Since no one refuses, Crollo said with an indifferent expression, I'll give you a few days to recover from your injuries. If you feel that it's about the same, come to me to awaken your mind, or go to Quan, who is also a nen. Ha, hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at Huang Quan in surprise. Ah, pointing at Huang Quan, Uvajin suddenly said, Quan. It turns out that you used Nian to defeat me in an arm wrestling match before. Isn't this obvious cheating? Are you not convinced? Huang Quan glanced at Uvajin. After you learn Nian, I will give you a chance to challenge. Hateful. Uvajin gritted his teeth and stared at Huang Quan, and then said slightly frustrated, losing means losing. I, Uvajin, can still afford to lose. The challenges in the future are for later. On the side, Franklin and others who didn't know what happened couldn't help but exclaimed when they learned that Uvajin had lost to Quan in terms of wrist strength. For those who have competed all year round, they know very well how terrifying Uvajin's strength and endurance are. Unexpectedly, he, who ranked first among spiders, would lose to such a thin Quan. It's really incredible. At the same time, I also have a somewhat clear understanding of the concept of reading in my mind. The sense of anticipation became more and more intense. Quote. Next to him, Huang Quan looked at the smiling Crollo in surprise. Why did the other party do this? Chapter 31. Doubts arise. A strange color flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. This guy just now was perfectly capable of taking responsibility for the awakening of all the members, but he got involved in the end. Do you want to reveal your inner intelligence to others and at the same time integrate yourself into the spider in this way? Or do you want to use this to suit the members' tendencies? From this point of view, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or killing 3 birds with 1 stone, are not enough to describe this guy's calculation. Spring. At this time, Crollo turned his head and looked with a smile on his lips. Can you accept it? If it's inconvenient, just let me do it. Test, or a test. Hearing this, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and nodded calmly. It's really inconvenient, so I'll leave it to you. Since the other party likes to scheme, the best way is to use the scheme to your advantage. After all, neither Meteor Street nor the unformed Phantom Troop. For Huang Quan, they are all insignificant things, with no sense of belonging at all. This is also the reason why I couldn't directly agree to Crollo before. The world of Hunter is so big, and beyond it there is an unknown and mysterious dark continent. Why stick to this? It would be best if we could conquer these guys from Phantom Troop. With the talents of these guys, they may be a great help in the future. Of course, the premise is that he can be subdued. If he can't, Huang Quan won't be too persistent. Maybe taking the hunter test, becoming a certain kind of hunter, and then venturing around the world is a pretty good life choice. However, at this moment, Huang Quan played his cards randomly without any scruples. But it somewhat disrupted Crollo's plan, and a look of astonishment quietly emerged in his eyes. He never thought that Huang Quan, who wanted to compete for the position of brigade leader, would give up the opportunity to win over the members so easily. What on earth is this guy thinking? Thinking of this, Crollo frowned and thought for a moment, then relaxed and said, Izumi really loves to joke. Even without my help, you will help Maki awaken reading, right? In this case, it must not be difficult to help others, and it can save a lot of time, right? Do you want to be ostracized by everyone? What a low-level provoking method. After thinking about it, Huang Quan nodded and said, Since you said that, then I was being a little deliberate in my refusal. Speaking of which, Huang Quan's deep gaze briefly made eye contact with everyone. Crollo said before that when you awaken mind, you will experience the test of life and death. This is indeed true. Whether you come to me or Crollo, what happens in the end depends on everyone's talent. Those with good talent can naturally master it in a short time, while those with poor talent will wither and die. There is no third option. I won't say any more nonsense. If you understand what reading is, you can come to me later. The words fell. Huang Quan gestured towards Crollo, holding the gray shield in his hand, and then returned to the balcony again. Things have been promised, as for whether they will believe in themselves. It's hard to say, he's not a member of the Spiders after all. Even if someone believed it, it would only be. Thinking of this, Huang Quan glanced at Maki's position. I saw that this guy was still looking at me, and when he saw me looking at him, he nodded heavily. Never mind. After patting his forehead, Huang Quan turned around speechlessly and looked up at the starless dark night sky. At the same time, there was a burst of noise in the room. Everything that happened today seemed to have forcibly changed their perceptions. Especially the news about Nian once reminded everyone of the weird and bizarre events in their memories. It turns out that everything unknown is closely related to thought. Suddenly, people asked Crollo more and more frequently. To this, Crollo can still answer everyone's questions calmly. If he is not clear about it at the moment, he will write it down temporarily and wait for the corresponding information to be collected before replying. Until the next night, everyone slowly dispersed with unfinished thoughts. Day and night alternate. 9:45 a.m. the next day. I simply ate whole grain porridge with no expectations. Putting down the bowl, Huang Quan looked at Crollo, who was looking down at the book not far away. Set off. Snapped. Closing the book gently, Crollo nodded, slowly stood up and let Pykenoden put on the black trench coat for him. There is still 1 hour left before the agreed time, which is enough time for us to arrive in the southern district early. Come with me. Ta. Seeing Crollo walking towards the door, Huang Quan smiled at Maki next to him and said calmly, "Wait for me, I'll be back soon." Do you have to go? There was a flash of worry in Maki's eyes. The 4 beasts of the Council of Elders are not so easy to talk to. No problem. Huang Quan, who was following Crollo, was carrying a bag on one shoulder and waved his hand without looking back. Even if something happens, that guy can't kill me. Ahead. Upon hearing this, Crollo paused slightly, with a strange look in his eyes. You can't kill him. In other words, is Azumi's Nen biased toward life-saving, defensive, or purely escape-assisted? How interesting. How would you react? From the back, Huang Quan stared at Crollo's back with a trace of amusement in his eyes. Although it was just to appease Maki, it didn't mean that he wasn't wary of Crollo. He didn't let down his guard at all against the guy who wanted to steal his abilities from the very beginning. Leave the spider stronghold. The 2 people who were originally walking back and forth gradually walked side by side. However, the atmosphere seemed a bit silent. Both Huang Quan and Crollo were uncharacteristically taciturn. Quite a while, waiting to leave Dongcheng district. Crollo turned his head to look at Huang Quan and said, "When you see that mountain beast elder, which one are you going to show?" Does this need to be said? Huang Quan said in surprise. Of course it's 2 pieces together. At this moment, Shield of Imprisonment and Necklace of the Brave are both in the package behind him. 2 pieces. Crollo frowned and spoke calmly. I can estimate the approximate price of the shield, but I can't give a definite answer for the necklace. After all, it's a racial thing I don't understand. At that time, if Elder Philip is interested, you can only explain the origin and year of the necklace by yourself. Okay. Huang Quan nodded in response, a very reasonable allocation. After all, only when things show history can they arouse the interest of collectors. It's just. Are you sure Elder Philip will believe what I say? This is also the problem. Going around the obstacle in front of him, Crollo mused as he walked. As for antique appreciation, I still have some reputation with the elders, otherwise he wouldn't be able to meet me. I can confirm the price of the shield, but what happens to the necklace is beyond my control. Unless you are also good at appraisal and can gain the trust of the elders. Authentication. Speaking of this, Huang Quan suddenly thought of the devil pattern and wondered if it could not only identify objects containing thoughts but also have any effect on those antique cultural relics. Even if I say that I know how to identify, Elder Philip will just believe what I say. Of course not. Glancing at Huang Quan strangely, Crollo said, have you forgotten the elder's title of mountain beast? For a collector of his level, it is quite normal for the house to be filled with all kinds of treasures and antiques. So, don't tell unnecessary lies. Once you anger him, I don't need to explain too much what the consequences will be. What if you only have a certain level of identification? Patting the package behind him, Huang Quan smiled and said, otherwise, I wouldn't have found these precious things in the garbage mountain. You can't say enough, and you can't be too conceited until you have tested the devil pattern identification range. Quan, are you sure? Crollo frowned and said, this will lead to two different results in the subsequent introduction. However, you can find these two old and precious collections. It is indeed impossible to do so without certain identification skills. I'm talking about a certain extent. Huang Quan said calmly. The specifics depend on the quantity and appearance of the collection. Although he was also looking forward to whether a large number of telepathy items would appear from the elder's side, this did not mean that he would make fun of his own life. When the strength is not strong enough, proper hidden development is the best choice for the time traveler. It's too vague, but something will happen. Crollo smiled meaningfully, then stopped talking and continued walking towards the South District. The result is also a very interesting process. I hope this interesting guy won't die there so easily. Ta ta ta. Accompanied by subtle footsteps, the two fell into silence again. Along the way, the overall appearance of Meteor Street gradually unfolded in front of Huang Quan. If we talk about straight avenues on the street, it means clean and tidy. Then the paths extending out one after another revealed chaos. When the sun cannot shine in, darkness and humidity are the most obvious sign of the trail. That's all. It took about 40 minutes to walk. A castle building with a very ancient appearance and a sense of history appears in the most central section of the southern district. There is a clear gap with the surrounding modern buildings. The dark-colored castle is very large, with a wide open lawn. On the outermost edge of the lawn is a towering rock wall. Directly opposite the wall and the castle is a huge stone wall with carved patterns and painted with gold, iron gate. That's it. Arriving in front of the golden iron door, Crollo signaled Huang Quan to wait, then walked to the center of the iron door and pressed the protruding black button. Ding dong. The bell rang suddenly. Not long after. Aha! An observation hole the size of an arm was opened above the iron door, revealing a pair of indifferent pupils. It's me. Crollo raised his head and looked at each other. He was obviously very familiar with the clansmen with these eyes. I made an appointment with the elder before coming here. Crollo, sure record. After that, the observation hole was directly closed by the people inside. Next moment, the golden iron door was slowly pushed toward both sides, and the wheels under the door made a squeaking sound. Quote. The iron door opened, and there were two guards on each side wearing black uniforms with firearms on their waists. The person who observed the two men before was the man with short brown hair on the left. The elders already know, you can go in directly. Good. With a faint response, Crollo led Huang Quan towards the dark castle 100 meters away. See this. Huang Quan followed closely behind him in silence, while also observing the surrounding situation. There are a lot of guards. Just in the front position, in addition to the 4 people at the gate, there are 2 guards every 20 or 30 meters. A rough estimate is that there are about 30 people. And this does not include the situation inside the castle and the back side of the castle. How afraid of death is this guy? Or is this the unique style of the elders of Meteor Street? Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and suddenly became somewhat interested in the elder known as the Shang Beast. At this time, when we arrived at the castle gate, the gate was open at the moment. At the same time, there are 16 guards in black uniforms guarding here. However, what left Huang Quan speechless was, whenever he and Crollo walked a certain distance, they would find guards in the corners and hidden places of the castle, not to mention those on the surface. Regardless of whether it is in the open or in the dark, as long as there is danger, guards will be placed to carry out strict prevention and control. Isn't he worried about being blamed? Huang Quan shook his head slightly. If your enemy is such a person, then the most effective way is to throw a few missiles or nuclear bombs over and kill them all in one go. Of course, the premise is that there is such a thing as a nuclear bomb during this period. Other than that, the best thing would be massive nen, maybe. Seeing through different spaces like air door. Keep the environmental routes and guards in the castle in mind, and plan an escape route to prevent any unexpected events from happening later. Despair. At this time, Crollo in front stopped and turned right into the open castle hall. Seeing this, Huang Quan turned around and followed. However, the moment Huang Quan stepped into the living room, his black and white eyes immediately condensed slightly, and his figure became slightly tense. Only because, in this spacious living room, 18 guard figures entwined with chi, their sights were firmly locked on their location. The number of worthy people. Fortunately, before I came here, I activated Absolute. After a thought, Huang Quan suppressed the surprise in his heart and followed Crollo calmly to the sofa in the center of the living room. Here, there is a relatively fat figure, carefully wiping the antique objects in his hands. How come there are so many bad people? At this moment, this idea is still popping up in Huang Quan's mind. After all, these guys did not use Ju to deliberately hide Qi like themselves, but always maintained a Tang cultivation posture. Based on that displaying Qi floating around outside their bodies, Huang Quan gradually had a general idea in his mind. Based on his own standards, there are at least 9 people who are weaker than his Qi quantity and about 6 people who are equal to his Qi quantity. As for the remaining 3, looking at the man who looked like an elder sitting and the 2 tall and burly figures behind him, Huang Quan shook his head slightly. The manifestation energy of these 3 people is at least 2 to 4 times greater than his, making it impossible to make an obvious judgment. The most important thing is, among these 18 people, how many have developed Nian? Wariness and doubt coexist. On the bright side, Huang Quan's expression remained calm, without any change. This way, seeing Elder Fripp wiping the thing in the form of a golden toad, Crollo did not speak immediately but stared at him quietly. Not long after, snap, putting the object in his hand on the coffee table, the fat Elder Fripp looked at Crollo and Huang Quan with a smile. Where's the stuff? I hope you won't disappoint me, Crollo. Certainly. Crollo turned slightly sideways, revealing Huang Quan's figure, and then said calmly, in addition to the protective shield mentioned before, we also have a special ancient artifact. Oh, opening his eyes squeezed by his plump cheeks, Flip looked at Huang Quan. Is he the Quan you mentioned? That's right, Crollo nodded. Both of these 2 antiquities were discovered by him, and he has a certain level of appraisal ability for antiques and other collections. Without excessive exaggeration, Huang Quan's value was reflected in front of the elders in just a few sentences. Yeah, hearing this, Elder Fripp looked at Crollo meaningfully, and then looked at Huang Quan. Seeing this situation, Huang Quan understood, took off the package on his back, took out the shield of imprisonment and necklace of the brave one from it, and placed them on the table in front of the opponent. Then, the figure retreated behind Crollo and kept a certain distance invisibly. Just now, he had already pictured the structure of the living room and the positions of the guards in his mind. In the event of an accident, what he was standing on at the moment was enough time for him to retreat instantly after opening the air gate. Good vigilance. After looking at Huang Quan's actions, Elder Fripp smiled, then put on his white gloves, picked up the gray imprisonment shield and touched it carefully. The protective shield of the Verta tribe was famous in previous centuries. Judging from the material, texture, and appearance, it is indeed authentic, but the broken part is too obvious and the collection value is greatly reduced. What price are you prepared to offer? 8 million nuns. Crollo said calmly. If it is a complete protective shield, the price will be at least 20 million ring nig. Although there are no matching weapon parts, judging from the symbol of a shield, it is undoubtedly complete. How do you feel? I can only give this value. Stretching out the 3 fingers of his left hand, Elder Fripp said with a smile. Although this thing is rare, the value of the damaged item itself does not have much collection value. For me, it's only somewhat interesting. But its historical value has already been reflected. Crollo smiled slightly. I believe you must also know something about this. After all, the Huerta clan has been extinct for hundreds of years. Even if this protective shield is incomplete. As of now, there are only a handful left, and they are all displayed in top museums around the world. I don't need to explain the value of those incomplete shields, right? 6 million nuns. Putting down his shield, Flip put away his smile, exuding a faint aura of majesty and remaining silent. Make a deal. Knowing the other party's character very well, Crollo understood that this was the other party's final bottom line, so he made a decisive decision and stopped negotiating with him. If this continues, the other person's interest may become all-inclusive. After all, this is Meteor Street. Flip smiled with satisfaction, reached out and picked up the wolf tooth necklace next to him, and studied it carefully. After carefully examining the unique material and special texture shape, Flip frowned slightly and asked. A special material I've never seen before, what's the origin? Upon hearing this, Crollo turned to look at Huangquan and nodded. This is the Wolf King necklace of the Yizwolf clan. Looking at Fripp, Huangquan said calmly, people of this tribe usually call it the necklace of the brave. Only those who successfully hunt the strongest monster, Wolf King, and survive will be qualified to wear the item of faith for a lifetime. Yizwolf tribe. After thinking for a moment, Elder Fripp suddenly said, is this the extinct ethnic minority at the United Nations in Bergros? I have heard of similar customs before, but I didn't expect it to be to obtain the fangs of the Wolf King of Warcraft. No wonder it died out so quickly. Huangquan didn't say much about this. Interrupting in while the other person is talking to himself often leads to unnecessary surprises. Moreover, no one usually cherishes the intelligence information provided voluntarily. Like Crollo, who is keeping his mouth shut at the moment. Regardless of Huangquan's outcome, it can make him feel a little happy. After a while, Flip looked at the necklace and asked without raising his head. What is the metal on the necklace made of? The spine of the Wolf King. Huangquan said calmly. This is when the size of the Warcraft muscle wolf exceeds 3 meters, the spine will gradually become metallized, and as the strongest Wolf King, the metallized spine is the most complete. If you soak it in water for a long time and drink it, it can nourish the yang and kidney to a certain extent. Oh, it also has a nourishing effect. Hearing this, not only Flip, but also Crollo couldn't help but look stunned. Is this guy serious? That's right. Recalling the message displayed by Devil Pattern, Huangquan nodded in affirmation without changing his expression. The necklace, which is ground into the essence of the entire body of the Wolf King of Warcraft, can indeed nourish the weak kidney energy to a certain extent. Originally, he wanted to keep it for himself, but when he thought about how many hands it had gone through and how it had been removed from the body, the shadow suddenly rose. Oh, interesting. Subconsciously holding the necklace, Flip looked slightly suspicious. After all, only the other party here knew whether the thing was true or false. But I can't judge. But if it's true. Thinking of this, Flip grabbed the necklace, turned around and said, I'll give you a chance to prove it. If you can show a good appraisal level. This necklace, I will pay a high price for it. Really? Huangquan glanced at Crollo and couldn't help but be secretly surprised. Looking at this elder's temper and character, Crollo has already figured it out. Besides, seeing Huangquan look at him, Crollo smiled and motioned for him to follow him. He has experienced this kind of situation before. For this person who is one of the most powerful people in Meteor Street, as long as he shows value, let alone some money, even yen can be sold. Why doesn't this guy come along? Seeing Crollo's motionless figure, Huangquan suppressed his doubts and became wary. Then, under the gaze of the burly Nin, Huangquan followed him. Without leaving the living room. When arriving at the bookshelf on the far right side of the living room, Elder Fripp, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped and then waved gently. Yes, the medium-sized Nin who was leaning on the bookshelf responded with a respectful expression, and then reached out to flip the books in the upper right corner. Click. As if a mechanism had been opened, the middle part of the bookshelf slowly sunk, and before long, the dark passage illuminated by fire came into view. Secret passage. Do you want to take me to see his collection to test my identification skills? Relating to the appraisal mentioned earlier, Huangquan remained vigilant while a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. If that's the case, I just don't know if there are telepathy items in those collections. Despair. At this time, Elder Fripp took steps towards the passage. Without him having to signal, the two powerful Nen masters had already placed Huangquan in the middle, one after the other. Seeing this, Huangquan's expression did not change and he followed closely. As for the other 15 Nen, in addition to leaving 4 people to monitor Crollo, the rest can conveniently leave one person on one side of the passage, thus forming a linked range alert. I hope you don't die in there. The corners of Krollo's mouth quirked up slightly. If the opponent can kill the Shoggoths, he will naturally gain his respect. But that's all. If you can't pass even this little test. The conversation last night was just an interesting memory. As for Maki, isn't this greedy elder the most suitable target to unite before becoming a brigade? Sometimes, hatred is also a good motivation. A long, dark passage. The fire flickered on and off. Amidst the silent footsteps, Huang Quan, who was following the elder in circles, couldn't help but simulate the passage route he had walked in his mind. The passages are not in a straight structure, but rather like a scattered small maze, with several different passages appearing every time you pass through. Third from the left, second from the right, fourth from the left, sixth from the right. I have memorized the route like this for a long time. Looking speechlessly at the fat man leading the way, Huang Quan frowned and finally gave up on the idea of memorizing this complicated route. Unless there is an accurate topographic map in front of him, it would be too energy-consuming to forcefully write it down. Subsequently, it probably took about a minute to go around. A steel door appeared in front of everyone. Despair. Everyone stopped. At the same time, the two people standing in front of and behind Huang Quan quickly came to him, blocking his sight with their tall bodies. Seeing this, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and simply closed his eyes slightly. Whether you look at it or not, it doesn't matter. Anyway, for a Nyen like him who has the gate characteristic, no matter what form of blockade the other party imposes, as long as he wants to enter, it will never have the slightest impact. Click, click, click. At this time, the sound of the mechanism starting up sounded. With the friction sound of the gears turning, the steel door opened directly. Cass, let him in. Elder Philip, who had already entered the house, heard a faint voice. Yes. The burly figure on the left responded respectfully and turned sideways to let Huang Quan enter the house. He followed him into the house, while another person guarded the door. Inside the house, under the bright light, Huang Quan, who had just stepped into the house, suddenly felt a strong sense of familiarity. Especially when you see the antiques, treasures, weapons and other ancient objects placed on the gorgeous wooden pillars with carved patterns in the house, the thrill is almost ready to come out of your pupils. Calm, suppressing the throbbing in his heart, Huang Quan calmly glanced at the wooden pillar where he felt clearly. The length and width of the house are about 200 square meters, and the surrounding walls and floors are covered with a thick layer of steel. In the center of the house, there are 10 purple gold wooden pillars with different specifications, lengths and widths, and an ancient treasure is placed on each wooden pillar. Either old, broken, new, or strange. Each ancient relic, like a charming object, deeply attracted Huang Quan's attention. Especially the purple gold wooden pillar in the middle, the throbbing feeling from other wooden pillars is stronger and more obvious. Seeing this, Huang Quan took a few steps forward as if nothing had happened. He glanced at him from the corner of his eye and was slightly startled. Just because that thing turned out to be a black broken knife with a simple appearance and full of cracks, as if it had been cut in half by something, and it looked like a black dagger without a tip. In addition, there are 4 different degrees of throbbing, transmitted from other purple golden wooden pillars. See this. Feeling the devil marks gradually stretch, for the first time, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with a trace of desire that he had never seen before. Want to. Must get it. This idea seemed to be firmly rooted in Huang Quan's mind. At this time, Elder Fripp, who was looking slightly obsessed and satisfied in the room, turned around and stared at Huang Quan, with a smile as charming as a tiger's. There are 10 treasures in this collection room, which is also the biggest harvest I have obtained from all over the world in decades. If you want to prove the authenticity of your necklace, it's very simple. No matter what your level is, you just need to identify the origins and names of more than 4 treasures. The Wolf King necklace. I will pay the highest price of 20 million ring ni to buy it, but if you don't identify one, then today, I'll spare your life. Before he finished speaking, the smile in Elder Fripp's eyes had turned into an indifference to life. Not far away, Cass had his eyes firmly locked on Huang Quan, and the chi all over his body expanded slightly. Exchange of equal value is very reasonable. After listening, Huang Quan nodded calmly, as if he was not affected by the slightly aura emitted by the 2 men. Seeing that the other party was so calm, a trace of surprise flashed in Flip's eyes, and he turned to look at Cass. In response, Cass just shook his head slightly. He knew what the elder wanted to ask, but he didn't feel the other person's presence at all. Even the chi seemed to him half as good as that of an ordinary person, passing away in the slightest. Let's start. After receiving Cass's answer, Flip walked to the gorgeous sofa next to him and sat down, playing with the Wolf King necklace he had brought before. He was indeed very interested in this thing that had a special function. But the premise is true. If it's fake. Flip glanced at Huang Quan, who was walking towards shelf number 3. Countless appraisers and swindlers have come to this house over the past decades, but only a handful can walk out alive. Ta ta ta. Ignoring the gazes coming from behind, Huang Quan came to the front of the first purple gold wooden pillar and looked at the ancient object in the shape of a white jade crown that had no tremor in front of him, waiting to reach out and touch it. Immediately, noticing his slightly dirty hands, Huang Quan calmly turned his head to look at Elder Philip. Are you sure you want me to touch these ancient relics directly? It seems you do know a bit about appraisal. Flip slowly raised his head and waved slightly. Seeing this, Cass next to him took out the snow-white cloth towel he had prepared from his uniform pocket and threw it at Huang Quan. Snapped. With just the right amount of force, it was sent directly in front of Huang Quan. After looking at the taciturn Cass, Huang Quan picked up a cloth and wiped his hands carefully, wiping off all the remaining dirt bit by bit. As for why the other party didn't take out his gloves, Huang Quan didn't care much. After all, this is just a form to show the other party. The real key point still depends on the level of identification of the antiquities in front of you. If something goes wrong in this regard, Fripp classifies him as a fraud. Just think about it and you will know what the result will be. People who survive Meteor Street and reach the top are never kind people. Anyway, as the two watched, Huang Quan, who had wiped his hands, did not hand the towel back to the other person, but stuffed it directly into his pocket. In this complicated and strange world, it is always right to be careful about hiding your own information. What others think is unimportant to him. When Elder Fripp saw this scene, their expressions did not change at all. As long as the other party wants to take advantage of this kind of thing is very common in Meteor Street, and it is not worthy of the two of them paying attention. The prelude is almost here. Turning his back to the two of them again, Huang Quan stretched out his hands and picked up the white jade crown very gently. On the surface, he was observing, but secretly he focused on the devil marks, wondering if he was facing devil marks. The ancient relics that I read, will it change? The shape of the white jade crown is very special, as if it has tiny white jade scales cast layer by layer, and the center of the crown forms a mysterious diamond-shaped carving pattern that is quite beautiful. Nothing much changes. Seeing that the devil pattern showed no change at all, Huang Quan sighed secretly and prepared to put the white jade crown back on the high wooden pillar. Inexplicably, Huang Quan, who deliberately pretended to be an ordinary person, felt that the qi in his body was suddenly consumed little by little. Later, in his surprised observation, the devil patterns that had been unresponsive in his mind gradually expanded. Information about the white jade crown also quickly appeared. So if you want to reveal information about ordinary ancient objects, do you need to consume qi at the cost? Realizing this, a flash of understanding flashed in Huang Quan's eyes, and he immediately looked at the displayed information. The most important thing at this stage was to identify the collection in front of him first, so as to gain a favorable situation. The White Queen complete. Quality. Rare. Year. 875. Note. This was made by Beerus, the top caster of the Ico Kingdom 800 years ago. He was invited by the king to use all the rare white jade iron in the country for his lifelong love, the White Queen, who was as white as jade. White jade iron is shaped like white jade, light in quality, but has a material hardness several times harder than steel. Forged by Beerus' top skills, it formed the only queen's crown in the world. Detailed information data continues to appear and spread with the continuous consumption of Huang Quan qi. Seeing this, Huang Quan frowned and placed the White Queen gently and steadily on the high wooden pillar. The qi continued to be consumed and stopped. I see. When Huang Quan understood the specific operation of devil pattern, Huang Quan's frowned brows relaxed. He looked at the series of information in his mind and extracted a few key points. After thinking for a moment, Huang Quan turned to look at Elder Philip, who seemed to be studying the necklace, and said calmly, "This ancient object should have been built by the king of the Agu kingdom 800 years ago for his beloved queen. Become the White Queen. Whether it's the top casting skills, the rarity of white jade iron, or the unique carving texture. It can be seen that this is a work personally executed by Beerus, the famous top casting master in history. Only this master can create works in the form of casting that are more delicate than carving. Therefore, each of the 36 works he cast in his life is rare and unique. And the White Queen is the last work of Master Beerus at the end of the year. From this, we can see the value of this thing." Combining the information in his mind, Huang Quan calmly explained to a certain extent without going into too much detail or being too general. Everything is displayed just right. At least, at this moment, Fripp had fixed his eyes firmly on Huang Quan, suddenly and unexpectedly. Surprise and many other emotions appeared on his face one by one. It can be called extremely surprising. Cass, not far away, looked even more stunned. Since working under the elder, this is the first time he has seen someone identify ancient objects in such detail. In the past, appraisal masters or scammers were either completely ignorant, or they put forward vague concepts and rhetoric. And the result of this is usually disappearing from this world. Bang bang bang. Very good. Hearing this, Flip clapped his hands and looked at Huang Quan with a bright smile in approval. Even he didn't know much of the information identified by the other party. I didn't expect that the other party could identify it in such detail. At this moment, Flip looked at Huang Quan as if he were looking at a treasure. This guy may be a very talented appraisal talent, we must find a way to accept him. No, we need to test it again. It's just an ancient artifact, so it can't explain anything. Just let me see how far you can go. Thinking of this, the smile on Flip's face did not change. He looked at Huang Quan with a warm look and said, "Continue." The look in this old guy's eyes. Noticing this, Huang Quan frowned, turned and walked towards the second collection. The second collection of Purple Mountain wooden pillars is slightly shorter than the first one, about 1.3 meters. On the wooden platform, there is a beautiful cyan vase with sacrificial sculptures carved on it, pattern. Werner's youth. The corresponding information was displayed in his mind one by one as Huang Quan touched it and consumed the slightest amount of qi. Afterwards, Huang Quan did not explain immediately, but put it down and walked towards the third collection of antiquities. The look in the other person's eyes just now always made him a little confused. Besides, his current persona should not be that of an omniscient appraisal master, but rather a seller who knows a little bit about certain appraisal techniques. This means that the impression shown to the other party cannot be too high and must be maintained at a moderately satisfactory level. Besides, seeing Huang Quan skipping the vase, the heat in Flip's eyes gradually dissipated. Since this ancient object was not identified immediately, it means that the other party's identification level has not reached the level of a master identification expert. It seems that the idea of taking in this little guy needs to be considered again. Collection office. Huang Quan, who didn't know what Flip was thinking at the moment, was holding a rough golden gauntlet and observing it carefully. What seemed like a very careful appraisal was actually a throbbing feeling in his heart, which made Huang Quan want to forcibly absorb the weak thoughts on the golden armor. There's no rush. Huang Quan calmly suppressed the throbbing in his heart. If he doesn't know whether absorbing thoughts will attract the attention of other wise people, he will not act rashly. Otherwise, once discovered by these two guys, Flip and Cass, the consequences would be disastrous. The best way is silently stolen. Recalling the function of air door, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with a strange color, and he immediately introduced the origin and identification results of this piece called Polo's armor to Flip in detail. To this, Flip, who was very satisfied with what he heard, couldn't help but clapped his hands. Although the other party is not a top appraiser who knows all the collections, the information he identifies is always more detailed than what he knows. From this point of view, such talents should be adopted by him for his own use. Thinking of the future where more and more authentic antiquities will become available, the plump smile on Fripp's face becomes even brighter. At this time, Huang Quan walked to the fourth collection and picked up the ancient object without Nian on the wooden platform. This is an old and broken red totem pole. The totem pattern on it is somewhat damaged and broken, but it is as exquisite and delicate as if it were close at hand, and the textures are mysterious yet clear. Somewhat like a bear. Not long after, Huang Quan confirmed his answer after looking at the information revealed by the devil pattern. It is indeed a totem called Flaming Bear, which is more than 3,000 years old. It is an object of worship and belief of the Yanshang tribe. Unfortunately, according to the information displayed on Devil Pattern, the quality of Flaming Bear Totem is only at the level of precious. Perhaps, there used to be thoughts here. Putting down the Flaming Bear Totem gently, Huang Quan did not explain it in too much detail this time, but gave a slightly general introduction. After all, it happened 3,000 years ago, and there is very little history in this area. If he goes into too much detail, it will inevitably make the fat man suspicious. But, at this moment, for Fripp, another accurate identification by Huang Quan really gave him a rare pleasure. There are many people, but very few talents. Especially the value shown by Huang Quan at this moment has already made Fripp want to conquer him. The other side. After explaining, Huang Quan calmly walked towards the fifth purple gold wooden pillar platform. This gave him the strongest throbbing feeling among all the collections. It can be said that it is stronger than the other four combined. Although this is a black broken knife that has been broken and full of cracks, it is still as long as an adult's forearm. The most important thing is that the obsession attached to it is the most intense obsession that Huang Quan has seen in such a long time. Be sure to soak it up. The thought of longing resurfaced. Huang Quan suppressed his calm expression, and gently held up the broken black knife that seemed to be about to fall apart at any time. In an instant, an indescribable sharp feeling spread from the only intact blade to the touch of Huang Quan's hands, as if he would be cut off and dropped if he dared to touch the blade with his hands. If it's so sharp, how did you become like this? With curiosity flashing in his eyes, Huang Quan looked at the rapidly changing devil patterns in his mind. Next moment, detailed information appeared like a waterfall. Cracks covered the dark blade. It's so sharp that the blade is restrained yet wanton, old and aloof. This is a killing weapon that has killed countless creatures and experienced countless initiations of life and death battles. Looking at the information displayed by the devil pattern, Huang Quan's deep pupils condensed slightly. Dark Demon complete. Quality. Rare. Year. 1444. Note. This was the last knife forging by Quetzal, known as the Death Forger, in the battlefield of death in his later years. Countless people were killed on the day the knife was made. Note. Thoughts are attached to it and can be absorbed. Dark Devil. Huang Quan couldn't help but be a little surprised when he saw the information displayed by the demon pattern. What surprised him was not the name of the knife, but the fact that the broken knife was not a broken knife as he expected, but that it was originally in this form. Seeing this, Huang Quan gently pulled the broken blade with his left hand to see if he could remove the fragments from the crack. However, what he didn't expect was, although this black demon is full of cracks, using brute force can only deflect the pinched fragments slightly, making it difficult to remove it directly. When Huang Quan let go, the slightly curved fragment returned to its original form as if being absorbed by a strong suction force. It's like a magnet attracting each other. Seeing how interesting this black knife was, Huang Quan couldn't help but become a little interested. However, it was impossible to study it carefully in this situation. After thinking about it, he gently and steadily placed it back on the purple gold wooden platform and walked towards the other exhibits at the back. Seeing this situation, Flip, who was looking forward to it, showed a little disappointment on his face. I originally thought that the other party could identify this dilapidated and unknown collection, but in the end, I just ignored it as before. We still need to let the gang find other appraisal masters. As Huang Quan continued to explain the next collections, Fripp secretly thought that after so many years, he already knew most of the origins of these 10 collections. There are only a few 2 or 3 pieces that no one has been able to identify. This has always made collectors like him itchy. For collectors, only by digging out the value of all collections can they get extremely satisfying pleasure. At this time, from the 6th to the 10th collection, Huang Quan skipped 3 items and only explained 2 items to demonstrate his general appraisal ability. Elder Fripp was quite satisfied with this. The level shown by the other party at this moment is enough to compare with those so-called top appraisers that were tied up before. Very good appraisal skills, really impressed me. According to the agreement, I will accept the Wolf King necklace for 20 million nuns. Thank you, Elder. Huang Quan's expression remained calm after hearing this, but his heart surged slightly. With 20 million nuns, the living resources for him and Maki should be able to be satisfied. With the extra time, you can concentrate on practicing mindfulness. At this stage, whether it is applied skills, potential energy or apparent energy, they are all very inadequate. Strengthening and tempering in all aspects must be carried out. Besides, Huang Quan glanced at the 10 collections in the room, especially the cracked black demon. I believe it won't be long before the ownership of these ancient relics will change. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. After waving his hand, Elder Fripp, holding the Wolf King's necklace, slowly stood up and walked towards the door with his fat belly, while waving for Huang Quan to follow. What's the meaning? Huang Quan frowned, and under Cass's cold gaze, he raised his steps and followed. Until he walked out of the collection room and waited for the steel door to be sealed again. Go back. Flip slowed down his pace and walked side by side with Huang Quan, a greasy smile on his fat face. Quan, is that the name? That's right, what a nice name. Turning his head to look at Huang Quan, Fripp said with a smile, who did you learn your appraisal skills from? Quote. Hearing this, Huang Quan looked at Fripp like a fool, as if to remind him why he asked such a stupid question. Cough. Feeling the incomprehensible look in Huang Quan's eyes, Flip was slightly stunned, and then his smile faded, and his words revealed indifference. Put away your eyes. If there is a second time, just keep your pupils. This guy. Feeling a faint sense of oppression, Huang Quan, who was a little relaxed because the appraisal was over, immediately tightened his body and vigilance after hearing this. Sure enough, this is the ever-changing Meteor Street. Before you have strong strength, you have to bear the contempt of others at any time. I'm very satisfied with your appraisal ability. Seeing Huang Quan's expression becoming cautious again, Flip nodded with satisfaction. I'll give you a chance to join Mountain Beast. When you think about it, come back and answer me. Before he finished speaking, Flip's fat figure walked straight forward. He didn't seem to care at all about Huang Quan's answer. Ta. Listening to the silent footsteps, a strange color flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to join one of the top forces in Meteor Street Mountain Beast. This was a route I had never thought of. It's a pity that I'm not very interested. Following at the back of the team, Huang Quan sneered slightly at the corner of his mouth. To him, whether it's Meteor Street or anything else, it's not a place worth remembering. He is more looking forward to the entire Hunter world than the garbage-filled Meteor Street. Hunter Test, Chimera Ants, Zoldyck, Netero, and even the Dark Continent. There are so many interesting things, but what does Meteor Street mean? What will happen if you choose not to join? So interesting. At this moment, Huang Quan didn't notice at all how similar his expression was to Crollo. Calm, confident, in an equally similar aloof composure. Click. The gears rattled. Accompanied by the sound of dense footsteps, a dozen figures filed out of the passage behind the bookshelf. See this situation. The 4 guards in black uniforms who stayed in the room, and Crollo who was reading quietly, looked up at everyone. When he saw Huang Quan's safe and sound figure, Crollo's eyes flashed with surprise. Obviously, Quan's ability to remain unscathed was beyond his expectations. Crollo, who had also experienced the test of the elders, knew very well what was going on in the maze collection room. Although I haven't been able to go there again for a long time. Unable to know the changes inside. But due to the difficulty of the test, Crollo believed that the Mountain Beast Elder, known for his ruthless smile, would not let people pass it so easily. Interesting indeed. At this moment, recalling the conversation with Quan last night again, Crollo felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. It was as if the person he favored should have a sense of accomplishment from such a performance. Snap. At this time, Elder Fripp returned to sit on the sofa and gently snapped his fingers. Ta. Elder. The guard in black uniform outside the door, who had already received the news, directly carried 2 old brown suitcases and placed them in front of Elder Flip. Then, he retreated towards the door with an expressionless face. 26 million nuns, take it away. Looking at Huang Quan and Crollo, Flip smiled like a smiling tiger. Whether it's Crollo or you, as long as you want to join Mountain Beast, you are welcome at any time, but don't keep me waiting too long, understand? Certainly. Understanding the meaning of the elder's words, Crollo glanced at Huang Quan meaningfully, then took the initiative to pick up a suitcase and said calmly, I won't let you wait too long. Quote. Seeing this, Huang Quan also picked up another suitcase and looked at the two of them calmly. From the beginning, the two people did not want to be in a superior-subordinate relationship. But judging from the large number of Nen users here, Huang Quan is already sure where Crollo's Nen information comes from. Send them out. After the transaction was over, Flip waved his hand and ignored the two of them. This change of mood was so fast that Huang Quan couldn't help but feel speechless. Please. After receiving the order, Cass stared over expressionlessly, and the other Nin also exuded a hostile aura. Let's go. As the other party always did, Crollo greeted and walked out the door with Huang Quan without stopping. Wait until the two figures disappear into the distance. Cass glanced at several people with greedy faces in the living room, came to Flip's side, and asked softly, Elder. Well, just follow the old rules. Lowering his head to wipe the Wolf King's necklace, Flippu wrote lightly without raising his head, those who are interested can go. Those who fail will also be dealt with according to the rules. Yes. With a respectful response, Cass raised his head and glanced at all the Nin in the room with cold eyes. Think carefully about the consequences of failure and take action. As soon as these words came out, immediately, 4 figures of different heights retreated from the crowd and disappeared outside the door. As for the other guards, they still stood in their original positions with calm expressions. Swish swish. Along with the subtle sound of wiping, the atmosphere gradually fell into silence. Outside the castle. What are his abilities? Glancing at the gold-lacquered iron door behind him, Huang Quan quickened his pace and followed Crollo, who was walking towards the East District. Not sure yet. Carrying the suitcase, Crollo said calmly. According to my long-term contact, his thoughts should be related to the number of guards or the number of collections. This is what he noticed when he got along with Flip over the past few years. If he didn't get the information about Nien, he was at most aware that the other party attached great importance to his own safety. But after awakening mind, everything was normal, but there were obvious problems. It's pretty much what I guessed. Rubbing the thumb and index finger of his right hand gently, Huang Quan thought, when I was in the collection room, even though I was observed, the person named Cass was always on the surface. But during the explanation, Elder Fripp's attention was obviously concentrated several times. Compared to the number of people, I feel closer to the collections. Maybe. Crollo glanced at him and said, What? You want to deal with him? Aren't you the same? After hearing this, Huang Quan said calmly, anyone can hear his last threat, right? I don't believe he would be so generous as to let us leave with the money. Ah, have you noticed it yet? Crollo smiled slightly and said, what do you think will happen? Are you talking about the future, or now? Glancing behind him, Huang Quan looked calm and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. If it were now, I would be very interested in what the elder would do if he came in. At least the process was very interesting. Crollo smiled, stopped, and handed the brown suitcase in his hand to Huang Quan. This is the wealth you earned, naturally it should be protected by you. By the way, after exchanging things with Elder Fripp, everyone will go through the final test. Either get rid of all the gentlemen who come to make extra money, or hand over all your wealth in exchange for a 50% chance of escape. How you choose depends on your own choice. Before he finished speaking, Crollo waved his hand and walked slowly towards the path on the left. If the final result is death, I will take your body back to Maki. This guy, it's really boring. Picking up the 2 suitcases on the left and right, Huang Quan rolled his eyes and felt several faint breaths getting closer and closer. He couldn't help but shake his head, turned around and walked calmly towards the path on the right. Even if a battle is about to happen, he will not give Crollo a chance to fully understand his nature. Compared to the incoming enemy. Of course, Crollo is still difficult to guess, and even more alarming. Oh, Seeing that Quan had no intention of escaping quickly, Krollo stepped into the shadow of the alley on the left, stopped, turned around and stared at the other person's disappearing back. He is familiar with the elder's character and knows his style very well. No matter who it is, as long as they dare to trade with it, they will eventually experience fighting and robbery. Only those who survive the first robbery will be eligible for future transactions. This is Meteor Street. No, to be precise, it's the rules set by Elder Philip. For the disciples who follow him, it is also a good way to earn extra money. After waiting for a moment, he saw 4 figures appearing and chasing towards the dark alley where Quan disappeared. A strange color flashed in Krollo's eyes. While keeping his distance, Krollo did not immediately follow them. What kind of surprise will you bring me, Quan? He had also encountered this kind of reception before, and in the end he chose to throw money on the street to escape because he didn't understand reading. I just don't know how far Quan, who can kill Shoggoths, can go. With a sense of unknown expectation, Krollo calculated the distance and time and stepped into the dark alley. However, when Krollo just stepped into the alley, the scene in front of him suddenly made his pupils shrink sharply, and a look of shock suddenly emerged. Minutes ago, the moment he stepped into a dark alley. Devil's Gate, accompanied by an extremely subtle moaning sound. The book of pure white and emerald green materialized instantly. Snapped. Holding a thick book in his left hand, Huang Quan stretched out his right hand calmly, his white index finger gently emptying the air. Air door. Open. The transparent air forms a frame, and in an instant, a rectangular sliding door without a lock is formed. Bang bang. Throwing the 2 brown suitcases in, Huang Quan carefully felt the outside of the alley, not concealing the 4 entwining scents that were getting closer and closer. It seems that it was a very correct decision not to expose Nian before. Confirming the existence of the enemy, Huang Quan's calm expression turned into indifference. He took a step forward and stepped straight into the air gate. Call out. In an instant, his figure and the air door disappeared without a trace. The dark alley once again returned to its former dark and damp state. Next moment, ta 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 ta. The sound of messy footsteps sounded, followed by 4 figures of different sizes running over quickly. Sniff. That brat's smell stays around here. Yuli, who was extremely thin and had a face like a vicious dog, activated Nen and carefully sniffed the remaining scent around him, and there must be greed in it. Nothing. Pengdu, who was short and fat, looked around the narrow alley and frowned. Yuli, did you make a mistake? There is obviously no hiding place in this place. That ordinary little guy won't disappear out of thin air, right? Must be still nearby. Starlu, who has a slightly sinister temperament and an ordinary appearance on the right, saw that the surroundings were pitch black and found nothing. He licked his lips and said sinisterly, Yuli's ability is related to the sense of smell, and it is basically infallible. Since the smell of the brat disappeared here, this means there are 2 possibilities. Either that guy used some method to dispel the smell, or that guy is a ninner like us, and his ability is still more concealed. What? Pengdu was surprised. How is that possible? I have been monitoring him since he entered the room, and I didn't find any sign that the kid had any thoughts. The life energy flows just like ordinary people. Idiot. Batty, who had been silent all this time, pushed up his sunglasses and said in a deep voice, as long as you practice targeted practice in this area, as long as you deliberately act abnormally, you will basically not be discovered. If that kid is really a nemesis, at this age, his ability and energy cannot be too powerful and lasting. Look for each other separately. Staru glanced at the other 3 people and said coldly, the target carries an amount of 26 million denais. It is basically impossible to escape our pursuit quickly. But if the other party is a nin, the risk will naturally increase. Modify the previous distribution method. The person who finds it first will get half directly, and the remaining 3 will share it equally. Is there any problem? No. Very reasonable. I do not have either. Immediately issue a warning when the target is discovered. Act. After the discussion was over, the 4 people immediately dispersed, widened the search range, and searched deep into the alley and other alleys. In a different space, I have to find a way to gain the ability to propagate sound in the future. Through the emerald green and transparent space, Huang Quan, who observed the conversation of the four people at close range, could not help but rub his brows and thought silently. After all, he didn't know any lip reading, and without being able to connect to the voice, he couldn't translate what the four people were discussing. Unless, suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed in Huang Quan's mind. He looked at his fingers, and then at the four people in the conversation. Sure enough, your mind can't be too rigid. Huang Quan shook his head with a smile, found a hidden dark corner next to the four people, stretched out his right index finger and opened a trumpet-shaped storage door as thick as his little finger in the blind corner. Suddenly, the weak sounds from the outside world gradually became clear after being absorbed and amplified by the sound storage door. Until I heard the last conversation of the four people and dispersed. Huang Quan stood up slowly, the corners of his mouth curved slightly. Then if you want money, just trade your life. The first goal. In the clear green space, Huang Quan's indifferent gaze fell on the guy not far away with a big nose and a face that looked like a vicious dog. Unlike the other three people who went out to him, this guy kept sniffing around like a dog, as if he had concluded that Huang Quan was hiding nearby. Enhancer is it an ability characteristic that tends to enhance the sense of smell? Huang Quan, who followed the opponent and observed for a long time, took out a sharp iron piece wrapped tightly with a bandage from his pocket when he saw the other three people gradually disappearing. This was something he specially found and sharpened last night, a piece of metal that was similar to a dagger and was easy to carry. Originally, he wanted to find a real dagger, but the only sharp weapon on Spider's side was Nobunaga's long knife. In this regard, Huang Quan could only temporarily find hard iron pieces from the spider's remaining materials and grind them by himself. It's sharp enough. Untying the old bandages, Huang Quan couldn't help but think of the black devil he saw in the flip collection room before. That kind of clear sharpness that seems to be able to cut through consciousness is indeed a destructive method that he is extremely lacking now. After all, neither the characteristics of the door nor the extended air door can cause direct damage. Therefore, before the corresponding capabilities are developed, all attack methods must rely on Huang Quan himself. Fat man, just wait. Recalling the smiling tiger-like Fripp, a cold light flashed in Huang Quan's eyes, and his indifferent gaze soon fell on Yuli outside. The interest starts from you. Holding the rusty and sharp iron piece tightly and using Ju as the application technique, Huang Quan tightened and minimized his own aura and presence. Open the door. Under the action of Devil's Gate, a half-meter wide circular sliding door was instantly formed. Looking at the door with his head facing away, Huang Quan stretched out the iron piece with an indifferent expression, and silently cut and pulled at Yuli's neck and aorta, which seemed to be completely unaware. Phew! A large amount of blood spurted out. Ho ho ho! The blood spurted out uncontrollably and he tightly covered the wound on the aorta. Yuli looked at the empty space behind him in disbelief. No enemies. How was he attacked? Feeling the rapid passage of life, Yuli looked around desperately, and the chi in his body continued to flow into the wound of the aorta, trying to temporarily seal the wound and stop the massive loss of blood. However, Huang Quan, who has been observing, how could he not know how tenacious Nen's life is? If you want to avoid unnecessary variables, a quick decision is the only option. Just when Yuli fell into despair, he tried to seal his trachea and asked for help. Call out. Behind him, the silent air door opened again. The dull, sharp piece of iron penetrated Yuli's temple without any hindrance, directly penetrating into his extremely fragile brain. One-hit kill. With despair and panic remaining, Yuli's pupils instantly expanded and fell into deathly silence. Boom! The corpse fell to the ground, and blood flowed out of the aortic wound that was trying to be closed, turning the surrounding ground into blood. There are three more. Glancing at the corpse, he thought for a moment that Huang Quan did not put it into another space, but took the iron piece and added a few more deep fatal wounds to the vital parts of his body, then closed the air door and disappeared. On the spot, only a broken corpse covered in blood was left. In the silent environment, it looks eerie. Different space. Recalling the direction where the three of them had gone before, Huang Quan walked out of the 50-meter radius with a calm expression. For a time, the chi quantity originally restored by Ju began to be continuously consumed. While passively consuming, at the same time actively using Absolute to recover. A wonderful sense of contradiction emerged in Huang Quan's heart. As for why he didn't just catch up outside, he naturally wanted to see if under the influence of absolute he could keep up with the consumption of chi when expanding the space range. At the same time, beware of enemy ambush. In Nen battles, Nen intelligence is crucial. Now that we are in a battle situation where the enemy is overt and we are covert, Huang Quan naturally wants to maintain this advantage. Fortunately, Cass didn't come. Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly as he recalled the guy whose chi was several times greater than his own. Otherwise, with the other party's vigilance and magnanimity, he will definitely find out before I take action. I just don't know if he knows those advanced application skills. If he does, if there is a battle later, we must first avoid his edge. And that fat guy. Walking in the darkness, the clear green space continued to spread from around Huang Quan, and the scenes from the outside world continued to appear in his eyes. Just like that, in the midst of spreading and thinking. Not long after, 200 meters away from where Yuli died, a short and fat figure was hiding in a dark corner, seemingly waiting for something. Just wait and see. Seeing that the opponent was trying to crawl like a fat rat, he tensed up in a posture waiting for an opportunity. No wonder you are so fat. Sure enough, you can't expect too much from the ninja of Meteor Street. Seeing that the other party didn't even know how to chew and still maintained the appearance of tank, Huang Quan couldn't help but laugh and shook his head. Is it simply because they don't know how to do it? Or did Flippo not teach them? It seems that the old guy only cares about quantity, not quality. Interesting. Thinking of this, Huang Quan smiled thoughtfully and looked down at the alert-looking fat man. Since you have chosen greed, then you should also accept the price that matches it. The words just fell. Above Fatty's head, an air door the size of an arm suddenly appeared. A white right hand wrapped in chi, holding a sharp iron piece, stabbed down quickly towards the plump and bulging back of the head. Call out. A subtle sound broke through the air. However, the next moment, Huang Quan plunged the sharp iron piece into the back of the opponent's head, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The moment he realized something was wrong, he quickly withdrew his arm and closed the air door. Next moment, boom, the roar of the explosion was loud. Through the green space, Huang Quan could clearly see that the fat figure originally lying on the ground gradually disappeared like a phantom, and the position in the other person's arms was the origin of the explosion just now. Illusion or clone. Compared to manipulator, it's more like transmuter. Looking at the fire splashing outside the space, Huang Quan looked calm and realized that he had underestimated those guys. Judging from the non-tactile piercing sensation, the figure just now was more like an illusion released by the injured. If it were a physical clone, there should be an obvious sense of obstruction when he penetrated. In a place like Meteor Street, carelessness will only lead to death. Simulating a series of intelligence information in his mind, Huang Quan stared at the outside world. He did not believe that after the explosion, the owner of the illusion would have no reaction. In this way, probably tens of seconds passed. The reaction caused by the explosion gradually became silent. At this time, about 25 meters away from the explosion point, a wall-like curtain suddenly lifted off the wall, and two figures, one fat and one thin, appeared. How is it triggered? Fatness. Batty, who was wearing sunglasses, fixed his eyes firmly on the location of the explosion, but found no trace of the enemy at all, which made his face become more solemn. I don't know. Pengdu shook his head and asked doubtfully, only through destruction, the illusion will completely disappear. If it were an enemy, it would have been blown to pieces by a trigger bomb, right? Could he be bitten by a mouse? Seeing that there were indeed no blood stains on the remaining limbs nearby, Batty looked at the surrounding environment and said calmly, in this alley, there are a lot of rats, cockroaches and other creatures. With your ability and characteristics of illusion of touch, if you don't move for a long time, you will easily be attacked and touched by animals. Maybe. Fatty smiled awkwardly. Originally, what he wanted to develop was a clone ability that could change forms at will, but for some reason it ended up being an illusion ability. Although you can change your form at will, you can't move or touch. This also causes his Nen to be more inclined to assist in hiding and setting traps. Let's go. Batty ignored Pengdu's awkward smile and said calmly, the most important thing now is to find the kid. Since the kid didn't show up after waiting for so long, it means that the other party has indeed moved away. What should we do? Pengdu said. Are you just giving up? Last time, Lukia's group got back 15 million ring nuns. Hearing this, Batty remembered the price of failure mentioned by Cass. He immediately trembled and gritted his teeth and said, then go look for it. The more than a minute we wasted by the two of us has been reduced by half. Now it's up to Staru and Yuli to see if they can gain something. That brat, don't let me catch you, or else. Click, click, click. For a moment, the clenched bones creaked. Walk. After saying that, Batty walked towards the harbor road. However, after walking a few steps, Batty turned around and shouted impatiently when he saw that Pengdu hadn't followed. Pengdu. Don't be so cool. Before he finished speaking, Batty's expression suddenly became suspicious. Just because, standing there, Fatty's pupils were dilated and his expression was unusually blank. Fat, degree. Batty shouted tentatively, smelling the slightest smell of blood, and instantly realized something was wrong, and his thin figure suddenly retreated backwards. However, what he didn't realize at all was, at this moment, a few centimeters behind his head, there was already a white right hand holding a sharp iron piece standing silently. With the opponent's explosive backside. Puff! The sharp iron piece penetrated directly from the soft part of the back of Batty's head, like breaking open tofu, without stopping. What happened? The same confused look appeared in Batty's eyes. Just the moment his brain was pierced by the iron weapon, his thoughts were already spreading uncontrollably, and his whole life flashed through his pupils one by one like a revolving lantern. I'm really unwilling. I didn't even see the enemy's face. Along with the faint muttering, Batty's consciousness completely darkened. Buzz. The air was opened directly like a window. The upper body of Huang Quan, who looked indifferent, was revealed. Gently pulling out the iron piece from the back of the opponent's head, Huang Quan frowned as he looked at the tiny cracks on the iron piece. It's just a few collisions with bones, and it's like this. Sure enough, hard things will be easily broken if they are not tough. There is one more person, which should be enough. Thinking of this, he wiped the remaining red and white things on the opponent's body with the iron piece. Huang Quan jumped out of the air door and used the iron piece to make other fatal wounds on the vital parts of the two people. Simple misleading is enough, the key is to strengthen yourself. After doing everything well, Huang Quan picked up the flare he found from the long-dead fat man, opened the safety guard and threw it deep into the dark alley. Boom! The dazzling red smoke spread rapidly in all directions, making it quite conspicuous. See this. Huang Quan, who was hiding in the shadows, slightly raised the corners of his mouth. Since there was only one person left, there was no need to waste time waiting. Just use that guy to test your current strength. Ta ta ta. Not long after, hurried footsteps quickly approached from a distance. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.